My boss's daughter fired me as soon as she took over the business, but she didn't know one detail. "We don't need old men like you dragging us down," she said, flipping her hair, as if dismissing me was nothing more than a formality. "My name is Stanley Rowe. I'm 59 years old, and for the past 18 years, I worked as the operations manager at Harper Machinery in Indianapolis, Indiana. I wasn't the kind of man who gave speeches or demanded attention at meetings. I was a steady hand, the one who kept the gears turning at a company that manufactured industrial equipment for half the factories in the Midwest. I didn't argue with Vanessa. I didn't threaten or beg. I just smiled sarcastically, nodded once, and walked out her office. Then, with no drama, I methodically cleared out my desk while the younger staff pretended not to watch. Most of them had been kids when I trained them, fresh out of high school. Now they had families of their own. I'd helped build their careers, but not one of them spoke up as I packed nearly 2 decades of my life into a cardboard box. Harper Machinery had been built from nothing. Charles Harper, the founder, started with a single lathe in his garage 43 years ago. Through sheer grit and a reputation for reliability, he grew it into a $30 million business. When his health started failing, he personally chose me to run operations. "You're the only one I trust not to cut corners," he said. But now his daughter Vanessa, 28 years old, fresh from a business degree and 2 years of experience in Miami, decided the company needed modernization and fresh perspectives. That was her polite way of saying, get rid of anyone who remembered how things were done before spreadsheets replaced common sense. Carrying my box out to my truck, I felt strangely calm. Vanessa thought she'd fire me clean. What she didn't know was that Charles had built a safeguard into my contract years ago, a clause he insisted on himself. If I were ever terminated without cause, the company owed me a severance equal to 2 full years of salary. She hadn't even bothered to check. I set the box down in the passenger seat and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the wheel. Through the windshield, I saw the production floor, the machines I'd maintained, the systems I'd implemented, the people I'd hired, all of it about to learn the hard way what happens when institutional knowledge walks out the door. I didn't slam the truck door or peel out of the lot. I simply started the engine and drove home to call Harold Preston, a lawyer friend who'd been waiting for a case exactly this straightforward. I've never been the flashy type. Married to my wife, Linda, for 29 years until cancer took her 4 years ago. Raised 2 kids. My son's an engineer in Denver. My daughter teaches 3rd grade in Cleveland. My life has been built on consistency and reliability, the same values I brought to Harper Machinery. Charles Harper wasn't just a boss. In many ways, he was a father figure I never had. My own dad disappeared when I was 11, leaving my mom to raise 3 boys on a secretary's salary. Charles gave me a chance when I needed it most. Back then, I was 41, laid off from a dying automotive plant, armed only with hands-on experience and a community college degree. Credentials don't build machines, Charles told me during my interview. Men with sense and skill do. Within 2 years, he promoted me to operations manager. Charles and I weren't fishing buddies or bar-hopping friends, but there was a respect between us that ran deeper than work. When Linda got sick, he rearranged my schedule without me asking, making sure I could be at every treatment. Family first, Stanley. Always. The first warning sign came about a year ago when Vanessa started showing up to meetings, fresh out of business school with a leather portfolio and perfume strong enough to choke the room. She talked endlessly about synergy and market disruption. I'd catch Charles wincing as she proposed cutting quality control or outsourcing parts we'd always made in-house. But he never corrected her in public. He just fixed things quietly afterwards. She needs to learn. Stanley, he told me one afternoon, leaning against my office doorframe. Some lessons can't come from books. The second warning came 3 months ago when Charles retired. He said it was for health reasons, but I knew better. He was worn down, beaten. When he handed me the updated organization chart with Vanessa's name at the top, the look on his face told me everything. Before Charles retired, he'd told me, I made her promise to keep the core team intact. The experience you all bring is what makes this place work. But he hadn't quite looked me in the eye when he said it. Something in my gut tightened then. It was like he already knew what was coming, but couldn't bring himself to say it. The morning after I was fired, I sat at my kitchen table with Harold, reviewing my contract. That's when my phone rang. Charles's name lit up the screen. For a moment, I almost didn't answer. Almost. But 18 years of respect doesn't vanish overnight. Stanley. His voice was strained. What the hell happened yesterday? Ask your daughter. I said flatly. No anger, just facts. I did. She said you were. He paused, searching for the words. Resistant to the new direction. That you were undermining her authority with the floor team. I didn't respond. I let the silence hang there. Charles knew me better than that. He knew I'd never undermine anyone. You're going to file, aren't you? He finally asked. Already have, I said. Harold Preston's handling it. I heard a long exhale on the other end. I told her to check the contracts. Told her before I stepped down that there were protections in place. Another pause. She said she cleaned house yesterday. You, Thomas, Jennifer, anyone over 50. My jaw tightened. Thomas had been our head of engineering for 12 years. Jennifer ran the quality control lab, like it was her own kingdom. Both were irreplaceable. Is that the direction you wanted, Charles? Clearing out everyone who built this place with you? You know it's not, he said, his voice tired. But I gave her control. It's hers to run now. In the background, I could hear Vanessa's sharp, demanding voice. Then Charles hurriedly said, I've got to go. The line went dead. I looked back at the contract spread across my table. Section 12, paragraph 3. In the event of termination without documented cause, as defined in Appendix C, employees shall be entitled to severance compensation equal to 24 months of current salary. Harold had highlighted it in yellow earlier. It's airtight, he said. They'll either pay, or we'll take them to court and we'll win. They'll cover my fees, too. I stood at the window, staring at the maple tree in my backyard. Linda and I had planted it when we bought this house 26 years ago. That tree had survived lightning strikes and disease, patched up and supported until it grew tall and strong. And suddenly I understood. This fight wasn't just about money anymore. It was about value, recognizing what experience brings to the table, respecting the foundation built before someone comes in and decides to tear it down. I picked up my phone. First, I called Thomas, then Jennifer. By noon, I'd spoken with every veteran employee Vanessa had tossed aside. Some were stunned. Some were furious. All were scared for their futures. Take a breath. I told each of them, check your contracts. Call Harold. Then I made one more call, this time to Douglas Clean, owner of Precision Parts across town. He'd been trying to hire me for years. Still interested in that conversation? I asked. 3 days later, I found myself sitting across from Vanessa and Harper Machinery's corporate attorney in a sleek downtown office. Harold sat beside me, his weathered briefcase open. My contract spread across the table for everyone to see. This is ridiculous. Vanessa snapped, not even glancing at the document. We're implementing a new direction. That's cause enough. Harold, 67, carried himself with the calm patience of a man who had seen every corporate trick in the book. He simply tapped the highlighted clause in my contract and said, termination without cause, as defined in Appendix C, requires severance equal to 24 months' salary. That's approximately $320,000 in Mr. Rowe's case. Across the table, Harper Machinery's young attorney, Justin, who looked like he'd barely finished law school, scanned the contract with growing unease. Miss Harper, he said cautiously, the definition of cause here is very specific. Performance issues, ethical violations, criminal acts. He was resistant to change. Vanessa interrupted, arms crossed. That's insubordination. Where's the documentation? Harold asked smoothly. Written warnings? Performance improvement plans? Appendix C requires a documented pattern. Not a single disagreement. Justin rifled through a thin folder in front of him, but it was empty of anything useful. Vanessa's face tightened. Fine, she snapped. So we pay him a few months' severance and move on. 24 months, Harold corrected firmly. as stipulated. That's ridiculous. We'll offer 6 months. Take it or leave it. I stayed silent, watching her. In that moment, I saw her father in her face, the same stubborn jawline. But Charles's stubbornness had always been about building. Hers seemed focused on tearing down. Harold calmly closed his briefcase. Then we'll proceed with legal action. Discovery should be interesting, especially concerning the simultaneous termination of multiple employees over 50. Justin's eyes widened. He leaned toward Vanessa and whispered urgently. She brushed him off. Before Harold or I could speak again, Vanessa turned to me. You should know we're prepared to fight this. You'll be tied up in court for years. I finally spoke. I've got time. She smirked. And we'll make sure the industry knows you're difficult. Good luck finding another position at your age. That's when the conference room door opened. Charles Harper stepped inside. I hadn't seen him since his retirement party. He looked thinner, paler, but his eyes were sharp. Vanessa, he said quietly. A word. We're in the middle of something, Dad. Now, he said. It wasn't a request. Through the glass wall, I watched them argue. Charles gesturing emphatically, Vanessa growing more defensive by the second. When they returned, Vanessa wouldn't meet my eyes. Justin, Charles said, his voice steady, prepare the severance agreement, as written in the contract. Dad, Vanessa started. Not now. Charles turned to me. I apologize, Stanley. This isn't how I wanted things to end. I gave a single nod. Nothing more needed to be said. As Harold and I stood to leave, Vanessa stepped into my path. This isn't over. I'll be reviewing all vendor relationships. Any company that hires you can forget about doing business with Harper. Charles flinched at her words, but said nothing. I only nodded again, remembering my conversation with Douglas Clean the day before. The partnership offer, the untapped market Harper had been ignoring. The future Vanessa was too blind to see. You're right about one thing, I told her. It isn't over. The severance hit my account a week later. $320,000 minus taxes, the largest sum I'd ever seen at once. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. Money wasn't the point. Neither was revenge. Not really. It was about something deeper. Value, respect, legacy. That same afternoon, I met Thomas Baldwin, our former head of engineering, at a roadside diner. The place was nearly empty at 3 o'clock. Just a couple of truckers at the counter, and us in a back booth. Harold got me a year's severance, Thomas said, stirring his coffee without drinking it. Not as good as your deal, but better than nothing. They want me to sign an NDA. I raised an eyebrow. What kind? 5 years. Can't talk about proprietary processes or business practices. 40 years in engineering, and suddenly I can't even talk about my own work. He gave a bitter laugh. You signing yours? Don't see much choice, he muttered. Got a granddaughter starting college next year. I slid a business card across the table. Douglas Clean, Precision Parts. He's looking for a consultant. Someone who knows hydraulics. No NDA required. Thomas stared at the card. Harper would sue me if I took this. Not if you're advising on general industry standards. Nothing proprietary about that. He pocketed the card slowly. What's going on, Stanley? This isn't like you. Stirring the pot. I hesitated, then leaned forward. Thomas had earned the truth. I'm partnering with Douglas, I said quietly. Heading up a new division. Specialized hydraulic components. The small batch, high-margin stuff Vanessa thinks is a waste of time. Thomas's eyebrows shot up. The custom work. Charles always said that was Harper's future. And she's killing it. She thinks she can compete with overseas manufacturers on price. I said, she can't. Thomas replied flatly. Not with our labor costs. I know. So does Charles. Thomas leaned closer. Is that why you're telling me this? You think Charles is involved somehow? I shook my head. No, but I had lunch with Jennifer yesterday. She said Vanessa's been liquidating equipment. The specialized machinery Charles bought last year. She's already sold half of it. That's over $2 million in equipment, Thomas said, eyes widening. At auction, she probably got 30 cents on the dollar. He leaned back, realization settling in. She's stripping the company, converting assets to cash. I nodded. And guess who's been buying property in Miami? Jesus. Thomas rubbed his face. Does Charles know? I don't think so. He built that company for legacy, not liquidation. We sat in silence, both of us processing what it meant, not just for us, but for the 100-plus employees still at Harper, for the legacy Charles had spent his life building. Finally, Thomas asked, "What are you going to do?" "Build something better," I said simply. "Something that honors both the past and the future, with Douglas clean." Thomas gave me a long, skeptical look. "And let me guess, you need an engineer who understands hydraulics." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "The position's yours, if you want it, once your NDA is narrowed down to actual proprietary information, not general industry knowledge." Thomas studied me carefully. "This isn't just business for you, is it?" "It's personal," I admitted. "It's about value, about building something that lasts. That's all I've ever wanted." 2 months after being fired, I was in Douglas Klein's office, reviewing blueprints for our new facility. The warehouse on the east side of Indianapolis would soon house Cornerstone Precision, our venture specializing in custom hydraulic components. The name was Thomas's idea. "Build from the corners up," he'd said. "That's how you make something that lasts." Douglas, a barrel-chested man with a full white beard and rolled-up sleeves, spread supplier contracts across his desk. "Machine shop confirmed," he said. "First 5 units ready by next month. CNC programmer starts Monday." He gave me a look. "Former Harper employee, I assume? Your recommendation?" I nodded. "Jason Wright. 6 years at Harper. Brilliant at modeling, underpaid, and overlooked. Vanessa had gutted his apartment's budget while doubling her own salary. Jason had finally walked out. How many is that now?" Douglas asked. 7. I replied. Douglas let out a low whistle. "Harper's bleeding talent. People follow good leadership," I said simply. "And Vanessa isn't giving them that." My phone buzzed. A message from Jennifer, still working inside Harper's lab. She was 3 years from retirement, stuck there, but she kept me informed. The photo she sent was grim. An internal memo outlining production delays, quality control failures, and 3 major clients threatening to walk. I showed it to Douglas. He adjusted his glasses. Just as we predicted. The brain drain is already showing. I slipped the phone away. I didn't feel satisfaction. Harper employed families I'd known for years. People with kids, mortgages, aging parents. Their pain wasn't my goal. "We should reach out to Midwest Manufacturing," I said. "Let them know we'll be ready in 60 days. "Already scheduled," Douglas replied with a grin. "Their purchasing manager can't wait to talk." I walked to the window, looking down at the warehouse floor where new machines were being installed. It felt like the bones of the future, something built on respect, experience, and innovation. Then my phone rang. Charles Harper. "Stanley." His voice sounded tired, defeated. "We need to talk." "I'm listening." "I know what you're doing, the new company, the people you're hiring. I'm not calling to ask you to stop. I'm asking for your help." That stopped me cold. "What kind of help?" "The kind that might save what's left of my company," he said after a pause. "Vanessa's been selling assets, cutting corners on quality. The board's concerned. So am I." "Why tell me this?" "Because you know the whole operation. You might see a path forward. And because," he hesitated, "because I should have listened to you when you warned me she wasn't ready." I closed my eyes, thinking of all the years I'd spent working alongside Charles. We built something worth being proud of, something that supported hundreds of families. "What exactly are you asking?" "Come to my house tonight, 7 o'clock. Bring Thomas, if he'll come. The board wants to discuss options." "Options?" "Including a change in leadership." His voice steadied. I looked back at the warehouse floor, at the small but growing operation we'd built from the ashes of betrayal. "I'll be there," I said finally, "but I'm not promising anything." "Fair enough. And Stanley," his voice softened, "thank you for still taking my calls." 6 months after being fired. I stood quietly at the back of Harper Machinery's main conference room. Vanessa was at the head of the table, surrounded by her young executive team. Nervous, green. The board had insisted I wait to speak until after her quarterly report. I watched as she tried to explain away the 37% revenue drop, the lost contracts, the quality failures. Halfway through, she spotted me, her face flushed with anger. What is he doing here? Charles, sitting with the board, gave the chairman a nod. Vanessa, the chairman said, the board has made a decision about leadership. Her face went pale. You can't be serious. Stanley, the chairman, turned to me. Would you like to explain the new arrangement? I stepped forward, holding a folder, the same one Harold had once prepared for my severance, but with very different contents now. Harper Machinery is merging with Cornerstone Precision. I said evenly. The board approved the acquisition this morning. Vanessa laughed bitterly. Absurd. I'm the majority shareholder. No, Charles said, rising slowly. You hold 20%. I held 51%, and I voted in favor of the merger. I slid the folder toward her. Cornerstone will absorb Harper's custom hydraulics division. The rest will continue under new leadership. My leadership, Thomas said, stepping in from the doorway. Vanessa's hands trembled as she flipped through the documents. This is business. I finished for her. Nothing personal. A year after the merger, I stood in the expanded production facility. Cornerstone and Harper's custom division, now united. The hum of machines filled the air, steady, efficient, alive. Charles joined me on the platform, leaning on his cane. His health hadn't improved much, but his spirit had. Quarterly numbers just came in, he said, handing me a report. Best in 5 years. I scanned it. Profits up. Retention stabilized. 3 new patents filed. Vanessa called yesterday, Charles added quietly. From Miami. I raised a brow. She's starting a consulting firm. Asked if I'd invest. Will you? He shook his head. Told her to come back here first. Learn the business from the ground up. The way I did, the way you did. She hung up. He smiled faintly, but she called back this morning. Asked if the offer still stood. Below us, Jason was training 2 new programmers. Jennifer worked in her lab coat, inspecting components with her meticulous eye. Thomas sketched a design before transferring it to the computer. Experience and innovation, working side by side, not in conflict, not one replacing the other, but building something stronger together. You know, Charles said softly, when I wrote that severance clause into your contract, I never imagined it would lead here. Neither did I admitted with a smile. We stood in silence, watching the company thrive again. Some lessons are expensive, but the ones that change us, the ones that truly last, are always worth the price.